Hey, and we are live for another episode of the MMA Vivisection. I am sorry to all those of you who have ended up watching dead links, waiting for us to go on the air. For some reason, the internet, the link between myself and young Mr. Rebish, my co-host, is terribly poor. And when I was trying to create the shows, it just was falling apart. So now he's creating the show, and it is working. We have life.
I'm in charge. I have the power of muting, Zane. Oh, God.
I would be more worried about that if I felt more confident that you would pay attention to it.
I'm just looking away. You've thrown to me 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not really concerned of like you playing puppet master over there.
I'm too inattentive to be manipulative.
Exactly. That's kind of my feeling. Which, fair or not, that's what it is.
Now you are lagging.
So we're gonna. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry. We're going to talk about this UFC on Fox Maia versus Condit card. Here, I'll switch my bandwidth down a little just to see if that helps any lag, because people have been talking about me cutting out lately, and fuck that noise. But we're going to burn through this undercard because, frankly, it's shitty. It should be fun. There should be some fun scraps on here, but even for me to die hard, oh no, this is really secretly going to be a fun undercard, I cannot pitch you on that. Nope. This looks like a lot of sloppy fights between guys that many of whom are not ready for this level.
The only fight that even stands out to me from an action perspective. Okay, Shane Campbell, Felipe Silva might be fun. I think Enrique Barzola, Kyle Bochniak will be a lot of fun because those are two kind of weird fighters. And then I like Sam Alvey, but his fight with Kevin Casey stands a very good chance of being awful.
Yeah, there are a lot of fights on this undercard where you might just be like, this is just kind of lame. So we're going to burn through it. The other truth is, frankly, I've been talking about, I just was talking about this or tweeting about it. I say talking, but fuck, I live online, so whatever. I keep getting to this card. I'm like, oh, I need to look at this card and do a little research and figure something out. And I'll automatically type UFC 202 and hit that, and then go to the UFC 202 page, and then click through to UFC on Fox Maia versus Condit.
Is that because you can't remember what the naming convention for the card is, or because UFC 202 has ruined all lackluster UFC events for you?
It's both. Not only do I forget, what is this UFC on Fox, UFC Fight Night, whatever, but I think about, well, what's the big UFC event going on right now? Oh, it's still Conor versus Diaz. That's still exactly where my mind is. I love Maia. I love Pettis and Oliveira, but this is not making me move on from UFC 202.
No.
So that's just a little bit of background as to where we are and why we might buzz through a lot of the early stuff on this.
There really is nothing worth much time other than the main card.
Yeah. On that note, let's just jump in. Alex Ricci, Jeremy Kennedy, thoughts?
Ricci, short notice replacement for Josh Emmett, who was very impressive in his debut. Short notice, and he beat up fighter from Guam, whose name I can't remember.
John Tuck.
John Tuck.
Yep.
Good showing. Now he's out. Alex Ricci, fairly good technical fighter, really knows how to play it smart and be cautious, which is a good sign for him. Could be a tough test for Jeremy Kennedy, but as in a lot of these cases with fairly unknown fighters, I'm just going to play it safe and go with the guy who had a full camp. Jeremy Kennedy was training the full time to fight Josh Emmett, and he should have the better fitness. He's a little more well-rounded and aggressive, too, so I'm going with Kennedy by decision.
Yeah, it could be. We could be in for a little bit of a weird fight if Kennedy can't get Ricci down, because Kennedy's a very counter-heavy fighter, and Ricci is a very safe outside, tentative striker. But Kennedy generally seems to be have a pretty aggressive takedown grappling game, and he's well-rounded, and I think he's just got more of the sort of all-around aggressive MMA fighter. You're trying to figure out an MMA's game. So, Kennedy.
I agree.
Odds on that fight, Kennedy is the favorite, -152 to -165. Ricci, the underdog, +140 to +125. That seems fine to me.
I always like when that's the response to the odds. Like,
yeah, I mean, they're two unknown dudes who have decent records. Who, one of them's a favorite, but not by a lot. That's. I have seen almost no tape on James. There does not seem to be any tape on Ryan James to speak of. From what I can tell, watching old tape of his, he is a grappler who is willing to strike. I am picking Hunter because Hunter is a power beast who is totally unrefined but has real knockout power, and seems like he could. I have hopes for him being a decent middleweight because middleweight's so shallow and he's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I said in my Sherdog preview that Hunter is one of those fighters for whom technical means throwing one shot at a time and aggressive means throwing everything with like no holds barred, just not holding anything back. He's still a powerful fighter, as you said, a power monster, as I believe you coined last week. And yeah, Ryan James, all we really have is some older footage. What we see is not all that promising. Weird, kind of a lanky style, fairly woeful technique on the feet. Really not a very clean striker. Durable and tough, and committed to finding the takedown and working his ground game. But Hunter is not a walkover as far as wrestling goes, and he is going to hit James's chin over and over and over again. So I think it's Adam Hunter by probably first round, if not second round TKO.
Yeah, I'm like I say, I have hopes just because it's middleweight, and I always want to see a new middleweight succeed. Hunter is the favorite, -157 to -180. Ryan James, the underdog, +145 to +135. It looks like, and once again, I think that's fine. Hunter fights, James all by submission, Hunter all by knockout.
Yeah.
So, given that they're both finishers, I think it's fine that there's not a big spread, especially for how unknown they are.
That's true. In this era, though, I think it's always safe. Like, if you see a guy with all knockouts and a guy with all submissions, it's usually pretty safe to pick the knockout artist.
It is. I would just, because we haven't seen any tape on James for like 4 years, I just kind of, you have to be like, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's just that there are more steps in the way of a submitter's chance than there are in the way of a puncher's chance.
Yeah, like I think that's why Hunter deserves to be favorite. But maybe James has become an awesome wrestler. Fuck if I know.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
So, that brings us to lightweight fight: Chad Laprise versus Thibault Gouti.
This is a pretty solid fight. Thibault Gouti looked pretty impressive, actually, in his last fight against Olivier Aubin-Mercier after a pretty woeful debut in which Teemu Packalén just destroyed him. He and Laprise have a lot in common. They both kind of lack that next-level athleticism, both in terms of explosive dynamicism and in terms of stamina. Both guys tend to wear down in the latter portions of a fight. Both guys aren't extremely powerful or extremely quick on their feet. But in this kind of matchup, with Gouti being mostly a striker who doesn't – he's got a lot of submissions to his name but doesn't really have the wrestling to make it happen, and so he tends to box with people. And in that scenario, Laprise just has more tools to offer him. Laprise is got smooth footwork. He is a capable puncher as well as a kicker. He has good defense. I think Gouti is game, but Laprise is a very different fighter from Olivier Aubin-Mercier. And there were even portions in the second round of that fight in which Aubin-Mercier was outstriking Gouti once Gouti started to slow down. So I've always said that, or I've said for a long time, that Chad Laprise is kind of the ideal Firas Zahabi striker, if only he was more athletic. But he does all the things that Firas Zahabi wants his fighters to do. And when that's the case, then you're a pretty smartly put together fighter. And so I like Laprise. I think it might be like an attritive TKO as Gouti slows down. So even though Laprise tends to fade late, I'm going to say third round TKO.
I got to go with Laprise too. He's also a pretty he's an able wrestler when he gets the chance. So I definitely think that if he feels like Gouti is matching him on the feet, he could shoot in and grind him up against the cage, take him down a couple times. And the other thing is just Laprise is a very good, when he's on his feet, he's a very good safety first fighter at range. Like, he knows how to keep an output going that doesn't get him hit. It doesn't lead to knockouts because he doesn't sit down on much, and he's not, just gonna run a guy over. But he's pretty safe out there, and Gouti, he's got a lot of the same style as Laprise, but he's not nearly as fast. So when he does throw, and when he's not throwing, in both situations, he's a lot more hittable, and I think that is going to generally steer the fight towards Laprise exchange after exchange.
Laprise has like classic Michael Bisping style with current Michael Bisping technique, except somehow probably not quite as powerful, and without Michael Bisping's famous stamina.
And without being in the middleweight division.
Right. It's harder to make that style work here at lightweight, the deepest division in the UFC.
Like Michael Bisping, he's perfectly situated at 185. You go higher than that, and guys hit so hard that you just can't sit and hang out with them for 3 rounds. And you go lower than that, and guys are so well-rounded that you can't just depend on outpointing them with low-power striking for 3 rounds.
Mm-hmm. Middleweight's a magical place, Zane.
Yep, middleweight is a really – it is – it's that strange dimension that you see, that idea of if you could look through the cracks and there's an infinite spreading out of dimension. That's middleweight.
There is an alternate dimension where Michael Bisping is champion, and it's called the middleweight division.
Exactly. And that brings us to the Fox card. Everything will be on Fox after the first 3 Fight Pass fights, and the leadoff Fox fight: Shane Campbell versus Felipe Silva. This is kind of a toss-up fight to me. It should be a fun one. I think Silva is a solid striker. He hits hard enough and he's powerful enough that if Campbell is just going to strike with him, Silva may beat him in just a pure Muay Thai battle. Campbell may.
Still there?
Well-rounded. He is, and he fights hard as hell. Few dudes in the UFC fight as hard as Shane Campbell does for every minute of a fight. That said, Campbell still loses a lot. He's just not that great an athlete, and he makes up for it by fighting really hard. But not being a great athlete means it catches up to you in a lot of places. So I'm picking Campbell here, but with a major caveat that Silva could stop him if it's just a striking battle.
I'm pretty much in the same boat. I like what I see from Felipe Silva. I think he could develop into a pretty solid fighter. I can hear my voice through your mic. Oh,
shit. I'll mute myself while you talk.
Okay. I think that like a lot of the Thai style fighters, and I think he's one of those MMA fighters with a very Thai style of striking, very kick based, works well in the clinch. Like a lot of them, he's not a great boxer. His hands aren't that great, but he does seem to have some pretty good instincts for counter punching. Like when he has to sit down and exchange as you come in, he does all right. And to add to that, he's pretty tough. And he does a good job of keeping his range. He's got a really nice front kick. I can see that giving a lot of fighters problems down the road. He's got a really good, snappy, penetrating front kick to the body. That could be a good weapon against a guy like Shane Campbell. The thing is that Shane Campbell throws more variety, more volume, and works more angles. And like you, Zane, I don't know that I can really count on Shane Campbell that much right now as an MMA fighter. But at the very least, he gets an opponent here who's willing to strike with him, one who's not going to try to take him down and subdue him. Now, in fairness, the last time that happened, John McDessie knocked him out. But John McDessie's a lot more seasoned than Felipe Silva. John McDessie is a criminally underrated fighter who, had he gone to featherweight like 5 years ago, probably would have been in the top 10 for a long time. And he's just been fighting much bigger dudes his whole career. And so he hasn't always looked as impressive as he really is. Felipe Silva, not as polished, not as experienced, and more limited than John McDessie. Definitely not as good of a boxer. So I'm going to go with Shane Campbell by unanimous decision. I think he may actually find some success by taking Felipe Silva down, as he has done in some of his other fights. But like you, I would not be shocked if Silva had a breakout performance here and got a big win.
Yeah, with a guy who fights as hard as Campbell does, he's always going to give opportunities. So, you know, if Silva can just like land a hard knee in the clinch or counter him really well, it could put him out. I definitely do agree, though, that if Campbell can turn this into like a scrambling, grappling war, Campbell's a great scrambler because he works way harder than anyone I've ever seen. Like that fight he had with James Krause, that was a ridiculous fight, and all because Campbell just would not stop every time Krause wanted him to like go away.
And that was like the best James Krause we've ever seen too.
Yep.
Like strategically, tactically, that James Krause was a step above the James Krause we had previously seen, and Campbell was competitive.
Yeah. So interesting fight. Odds on that fight, Campbell is the favorite, -125 to -140. Felipe Silva, the underdog, +1.
+1.
105, and really fine.
What were those odds for Silva again?
To -105.
Okay.
Yeah.
That feels about right. I think Shane Campbell, he's got the experience in the UFC. He probably deserves to be the favorite, but this is probably one of the shakier picks on the card for me.
He's kind of got the Francisco Rivera disease going on, where it's like, I want to pick this guy really badly because I like his game so much, and then he just does not win in the UFC, and you've got to come to terms with at some point this dude doesn't win this level of fight.
Yeah.
So I think he wins it, but I can't hate the odds being really razor thin. That brings us to Garreth McClellan versus Alessio de Chirico.
I was really impressed with Alessio de Chirico in his UFC debut. I did not expect him to do well against Bojan Veličković, and I thought he won that fight. He had good mobility. He seems to be just a really good natural athlete who seems to pick up things quickly, and that also goes some way to explaining the amount of improvement he showed between his regional Italian fights and the fight with Veličković, because he was a lot better. His counter punching was great. His boxing in general, his footwork was more efficient. His kicks were as good as they looked before, and his wrestling was better. He had de Chirico is one of those fighters who I don't think is a technically wonderful wrestler. It's not like he's an incredible chain wrestler or anything like that, but like guys like Alexander Gustafsson and Donald Cerrone, he has that striker's instinct for timing takedowns. His footwork and his timing, or like George St. Pierre, who always attributed his great shot to his karate background because it allowed him, he knew how to cover distance and how to walk people into traps in ways that wrestlers often don't, because they don't move as much and they get penalized for retreating. So they can't set up those opportunities in the sport of wrestling. And I think that gives him a big advantage over Garreth McLellan. Garreth McLellan is very tough. He is pretty dangerous in the clinch, very ferocious from top position. The problem is that none of the mechanical pieces of his game are geared towards making those things happen. Like, he doesn't have a good wrestling game at all. He's got some takedowns from the clinch, but really he's not effective there. And when your specialty is beating people up from top position, that can hamper you. And when your specialty is the clinch, but you don't have the cage cutting footwork or the jab or the distance striking to close that gap and make that happen, then you're in trouble too. So I think this may end up looking somewhat similar to McClellan's fight with Magnus Siedenblad, except that I think Chirico is actually a more natural striker than Siedenblad. He's a little more comfortable at that range. And if this one goes to the ground, it's probably going to be Chirico making it happen. So McClellan is capable of surprising. I didn't expect him to beat Bubba Bush, but he did. Still, the pick has to be Chirico, and I think it's probably going to be like a second or third round TKO.
I feel a little like McClellan is sort of, and that I've always picked a Garreth McClellan fight, right? Like, I know exactly. I feel like I have a really good picture of exactly what he's going to do in each fight.
Yeah.
And yeah, the biggest thing for him is that he not only, you talk about the pieces not being there to implement the game he wants, but he doesn't have the ability to ever keep a fight where he wants it at any time.
Yes. Yep.
Like, if he's striking from range.
If he's striking from range?
What?
If he's striking from... You're cutting out still.
Oh, yeah, sorry. If he's striking from range and he lands a hard shot, the next moment he's going to be in the clinch. If he's in the clinch and he's doing good work, the next moment he's going to be on his back. And, it's always... He's aggressive and very much in that I'll take the fight wherever, which just means I'll let my opponent dictate where they want me.
He's got that Beck Rawlings syndrome going on.
And Chirico is much more like, I remember watching tape on him, and I'm like, this is a good athlete who's at without any of the adjoining MMA metagame.
Yeah.
But he's got like the good individual technical skills. Like, he's got some good boxing in points. He's got some good wrestling in points. He's got some good grappling. And I think the experience will let that game meld much more, and it is melding much more with the experience he's gotten over time. So yeah, I think that the Chirico, he should have this fight, unless McClellan just lands some huge bomb or gets a miracle sub from somewhere. But the Chirico I feel like he's got some of that Chris Weidman kind of athleticism to him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the same fundamental skill base that Weidman was working on in the same camp and training, but just that sort of like, not necessarily fast, but a much better athlete than you necessarily think moment to moment.
Yeah, and as far as striking goes, he does have opportunities to improve there because let us not forget that Italy has produced quite a few very good Dutch-style kickboxers, like international kickboxers and Muay Thai fighters. So it's not surprising that he's good there. I hope to see him continue to meld that into an MMA game. But that, again, the Velichkovic fight was very promising in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Odds on this, Chirico is the reasonably heavy favorite, minus 220 to minus 265. And Garreth McClellan, the underdog, plus 231 down to plus 160. I still think those odds are pretty much right. Like, so far, I have no problem with the odds on this card.
No problems. I don't think there's really value there on a fight at this level, but that's because the odds feel accurate. I thought Chirico beat Velichkovic, which was a hell of a tough debut for a guy from a scene not known for its MMA talent. And Velichkovic is a much tougher, more well-rounded out than Garreth McClellan. Yeah,
very much so. That brings us to featherweight bout, Enrique Barzola versus Kyle Bochniak. And I want to pick Enrique Barzola.
Barzola is just so fun.
Yeah. I like rooting for a guy with that sort of weird, funky, like, what is like Peruvian or something?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this really funky wrestling game. And he's just, like, he feels like that, like somebody made a crazy creative fighter that works in the game despite not being built in a way that anybody else would make a fighter, you know? And that's a fun guy to root for. But I think Bochniak is kind of where the party ends. An athlete and a very powerful puncher, but he's just a really fundamentally solid, like ground up meat and potatoes style MMA prospect, working on all the aspects of the game, not bad anywhere. The biggest reason he lost to Charles Rosa is just that he wasn't experienced enough to know how to switch gears when Rosa adapted to his game, because Rosa is more experienced.
And it was short notice too. Like he tired out a little bit.
And it was short notice. But Barzola is not more experienced than the exact same kind of problems of being unable to adapt to a fighter that he can't just beat out.
Mm-hmm.
And Bochniak wins that fight. I think Bochniak's just a little too big, a little too powerful, a little too well-rounded for Barzola.
Yeah, I can see a path to victory for Barzola here. He does have twice as many fights as Bochniak. Like, he's been fighting longer.
Yeah.
Of course, Bochniak does have the amateur background. Crazy thing is Barzola is younger than Bochniak, which he has old man face. He does not seem like he's 27 years old, but he is.
It's true.
That's what life in Peru does to you, I guess. Enrique Barzola has a good functional game. He is like a janky George St. Pierre. He has this awkward movement and rhythm. He does a lot of lateral movement, a lot of feinting, and he plays with tempo a lot, which is a good thing. It's one of those things that's very difficult to teach. So he can get guys overcommitting. He can set up his takedowns and his punches. And I was very impressed with his ground and pound against Horacio Gutierrez. Like, very, very dangerous from top position. Doesn't matter if he's in guard, half guard, whatever. He will sit on top of you and beat you up, hit the body, throw elbows, everything. Those are good things to have. But I think that at some point you got to wonder about the quality of training at Pitbull Martial Arts Center, and this is not the one with the Pitbull brothers. This is a gym in Peru. They've got some decent enough fighters, but the competition down there just is not. If you're fighting mainly in Peru and in Central America, then there's just not a ton of good talent down there. You know what I mean? It's not like coming up in Brazil or Canada or even like coming up in like Germany or something like that, where there is a little more, or in the UK where there's a little more of an MMA background. And Bochniak is more powerful. He's a much better wrestler than Gutierrez and a very good scrambler as well. And the problem for Barzola is that his strategy was working, but he was growing weary in that Gutierrez fight by the end. And if Bochniak comes in better shape than he did last time and he can stop the takedowns, I think he'll end up trapping Barzola on the feet. And he is probably marginally the better striker there and certainly more powerful. So he got a little right hand happy in that last fight, but I think he's looked better than that in past fights, and he should continue to improve. So I am going to go with Bochniak by, let's see, what did I pick in my preview? Decision.
Yeah, the big thing, too, I think I like out of Bochniak that I don't think Horacio Gutierrez had is he's got a lot of, like, real natural confidence in his game. That he's very... And in a way that Gutierrez has power and throws hard kicks, but is a lot more tentative about letting go.
Yep. And
gave Barzola a lot more opportunities to confound him with movement.
Yeah, and I recall hearing Brian Stan in that fight with Barzola, the Gutierrez-Barzola fight, he talked about how Gutierrez said that he hated fighting, that he was incredibly anxious and nervous before every fight, and he kind of looked like it. And I don't think Bochniak has that problem.
No. Bochniak is the favorite, coming in minus 200, or no, minus 180 to minus 200. And Barzola is the underdog, plus 174 down to plus 135. I would almost say that Barzola is worth a small underdog bet there, just because Bochniak got functional, and it just may be enough to confound Bochniak completely. Like, I'm picking Bochniak. I think he deserves to be the favorite, but I think there's a strong case for Barzola to take it.
Yeah, plus 170 implies a 37% chance of winning. If you think that Barzola's chances are better than that, then he may be worth a look.
Yeah, not a big one. It's not the kind of fight that deserves a lot. But anyway, we should move on to the prelim main event, Sam Alvey versus Kevin Casey, and what a main event it is.
What a curious choice for featured prelim, right?
Somebody... I can't remember who it was like, oh man, it's like Sam Alvey's fighting again this weekend. It feels like he just fought yesterday. I can't believe it. And I was saying that Sam Alvey is middleweight's Donald Cerrone, which is exactly as damning of middleweight as you think it might be.
Yeah. I like Sam Alvey.
I do too.
Not only as a person, he's a likable guy. He's very charismatic. He seems like a really easygoing dude. He loves cheesing and cutting weird shapes into his chest hair and things like that. He's that kind of guy. But Sam Alvey's problems are well known at this point. He is too patient. He is probably the purest counter puncher in MMA, or at least in the UFC. He waits on counters, and he has not yet, despite all of his experience, he's fought 35 times. He has not yet developed a consistent way to make people open themselves up for counters. And that has been a problem for him, especially with guys like Tom Watson, who is still plotting his eventual return and revenge in the UFC, of course. Tom Watson is the middleweight's middleweight. Tom Watson kind of laid out the blueprint for beating Sam Alvey, and it's worked for others. Like, it worked for Elias Theodorou. Like, you give him things that aren't big enough for him to respond to. You take advantage of the fact that he's fairly slow-footed. He's a plotter, and you move around him, and you kick his legs, and you poke him from long range, and you never open up and give him a chance to hit you hard. And it works. And Kevin Casey may be able to do that. He showed some real technical improvement in his last fight. Like, I expected Mutapcic to kind of run through him, and he didn't. And Mutapcic is not dissimilar from Alvey in a lot of ways. Mutapcic had the same problem that Alvey has had, the same problem that another very pure counterpuncher in Valentina Shevchenko had against Amanda Nunes. He had Casey done, as Casey always is in the third round, and he couldn't put enough pressure on him to put him away. He wasn't comfortable leading. And so Casey built up a bit of a lead. He worked his kicking. He's now been training, I guess, with Anthony Hardonk, a solid trainer and definitely somebody who will teach you how to kick the hell out of somebody's legs. And he did that. He looked good. He'd sharpened up his punches. He'd sharpened up his kicks. He'd sharpened up his movement just enough to make that fight really competitive in the early going. Those are tactics that work against Sam Alvey. You move around him. You kick him. It works. The thing is Sam Alvey is a more devastating puncher than Mutapcic by far. His right hook is killer. And the only reason he doesn't have more knockouts to his name, and he's got quite a few, is, again, because he can't make those people give up those punches. But Kevin Casey, no matter how much he technically improves, just does not have the mentality to be a consistent winner at the UFC level. He will destroy guys in the first round on the regionals because he's big and powerful and he has a great ground game. But when it comes to the UFC level, when guys are durable and they can take some shots and they're not cowed by this big, intimidating guy in front of them, he starts to fade, and I hate to say it, but tends to look for ways out in a lot of his fights. He just doesn't have that kind of winning mentality. Like, we had him – I don't know how bad the eye injury was. I have heard from others that Kevin Casey was walking around and showed no signs of an eye patch or anything after the fight. But all I do know is that there are other fighters who would have definitely made an effort to continue fighting had they been poked in the first 11 seconds of a fight. And when Antonio Carlos Jr. did that to Casey, he basically asked for the fight to be stopped. Most fighters will not say, I cannot see, please stop the fight. That's just what I'm saying. Not that it's good for their health. Kevin Casey's probably a smarter guy than most, but most fighters would have fought through that. And most fighters don't consistently fade mentally as well as physically in the second and third rounds of every single fight. And Kevin Casey always does. So I think what happens in this fight is Kevin Casey takes round one. I think he starts to wilt. And I think because Alvey is as much a counterpuncher as Mutapcic, but more devastating when he finds those counters, Casey ends up reaching on one critical shot at some point in the second or third round, and Alvey puts his lights out or forces him to shell up and pounds him out. But like I said, I could see like another draw. I could even see a Kevin Casey win, because if he does what he does to Mutapcic and backs off and pulls away when he feels his gas start to go, Alvey may not be able to force the openings.
This is true. Alvey is shockingly one-dimensional.
Yes.
He's one-dimensional in a way that actually does a disservice to the term one-dimensional. Like, it is literally just a right hand. Like, that is how one-dimensional it is. It's not even like, oh, he's just a counterpuncher. It's like, no, he's literally just one punch.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if he guillotined Kevin Casey again like he did Eric Spicely?
I know. So I am picking Alvey, though, and I'm actually going to pick him by first-round KO.
Oh.
Because I think that a big difference between Alvey and Mutapcic is that a lot of Mutapcic's tentativeness or his unwillingness to throw seems born out of a tentativeness that he does not want to deal with the reaction. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to throw hands because I don't want to get taken down. I don't want to get hit, whatever. Alvey, that is not the case at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mutapcic has kind of like an all-or-nothing approach to defense.
Yeah.
He wants to make you miss bad before he hits you. Sam Alvey will hit you even if you hit him on the chin. He will stand his ground and counter.
Sam Alvey's attitude is entirely, I just want you to throw so that I can hit you.
Sure, yeah.
That's it. And I think that the way Kevin Casey does throw strikes, especially punches, he tends to like dive forward into them.
Yeah.
And I think that sets him up really perfectly for the kind of counters that Alvey wants to throw.
Yeah, I agree.
Add in that Alvey's never been submitted and
has good takedown defense too.
Has good takedown defense too, and I think it sets up a possibility for an early KO for him. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, I could absolutely see if Casey can get the takedown, and even if he doesn't submit Alvey, just kind of work him over for a round, then I can easily see Alvey losing just because he can never get started enough to then retake over the fight.
Yep.
But I don't have faith in Casey to pull that off multiple times. Even to the point that Mutapcic, like I say, a lot, I think had the opportunities, but couldn't do anything with that. Alvey had them too against Teodoro. Like that Teodoro fight was just so fucking frustrating because it's like, I like seeing Teodoro win, so I was happy for him. But it's like, Alvey, you have 5 times the opportunities you're taking in this fight. Mm-hmm. He got against the cage, had him pinned against the cage multiple times and just leaned on him. And it's like, you are never going to get a clearer opportunity to do something than this. So there's a horrible opportunity for this just to become the slowest, ugliest, stupidest grind because it's middleweight, and that's what middleweight fights do.
That's why it's a very curious choice for featured prelim, because there is no other fight on these prelims I think has a stronger chance of being really dull.
But I'm going to pick that early KO just because aggressive in the first round like he always does, and really just give Alvey exactly that opportunity he wants to throw something huge. The odds on that fight, Alvey is the favorite, minus 199 to minus 235. Casey the underdog plus 191 to plus 165. And I am going to tell you all now, do not bet on this.
No.
Like,
the only way you could bet on this is if you could sweeten it with a prop, maybe. What's Alvey by KO?
Alvey by...
There's Alvey inside the distance at minus 140. No, don't do it.
No. Like, there's no... Like, part of me's like, Casey worth a chance? It's like, no, he's really not. He's not nearly trustable for any kind of chance bet. And Alvey is not nearly trustable to play for him as a favorite.
Casey by decision is plus 340.
Yeah, that
I might put $1 on that, like $1.
$1.
Yeah,
maybe. All right. On that note, let's get to the main card. Joe Lauzon, Jim Miller, and this is a great. I'm glad to see this rematch. The first fight was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Both men have been really hot and cold since then.
Mm-hmm.
My gut instinct tells me that Joe Lauzon's hot and cold has to do a lot more with facing some really good and slightly underrated fighters that have had the right style answers to him. Ali Quinta, Evan Dunham, Michael Johnson. Just guys that are better than him, frankly. Evan Dunham's one of those dudes that's like sneakily a lot better than we want to think he is.
I love Evan Dunham. Evan Dunham is sneakily one of the very best fighters in that division.
Yeah, like you look at who he's lost to, and it's TJ Grant when TJ Grant was still
mm-hmm.
and those are his recent losses.
Who are they again? You cut out.
Oh, his recent losses: TJ Grant, then RDA, Cerrone, and Barboza.
Yeah, nothing to be ashamed of there.
Yeah. So Miller, on the other hand, his career track seems much more of some big win, some fun wins punctuated by declining performances.
Yeah.
Nancy Medeiros, he beat Fabricio Camoes and Danny Castillo and Takanori Gomi. Gomi should retire. Castillo has retired, more or less. And, Medeiros is consistently inconsistent, and Camoes is gone. I don't know where Camoes is at this point. And his losses, Cerrone, Darius, Chiesa, and then Diego Sanchez, and that Sanchez fight was just bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and watched the Gomi fight after this, and, yeah, it was a great win, but Miller didn't look like confident or faster on the trigger. He looked like he was fighting a totally shot Takanori Gomi.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for me to draw anything away from that after that Sanchez fight and be like, yeah, Jim Miller is really back at it. I feel like this is just one of those places where what was a close and fun fight that Miller clearly won the first time will be a close and fun fight that Miller will clearly lose the second time. Lauzon just still looks like the same fighter he's been,
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think the only thing here is, are you going with Lauzon?
Yeah, I'm going with Lauzon. Maybe even by knock, probably not.
I think the thing is, I think that Lauzon fight was probably the best performance of Miller's career.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was because it was a good matchup for him stylistically.
Yep.
And both guys have faded. I agree. It looks like Miller's probably faded more. Like his wins have been a little less impressive. His losses have been more decisive. Again, they like Lauzon's losses, they have been to the divisional elite. But
And Diego Sanchez.
Yeah, right. But, Lauzon, I think the style matchup is still tough for Lauzon. So really it's how much has Jim Miller declined is the real question here. If Jim Miller has declined a lot more than Joe Lauzon, which is possible, then Joe Lauzon can overcome the style matchup. But if not, then Jim Miller is still the better kickboxer. has a more varied attack. Lauzon is mostly a boxer and a pretty rote one at that. He throws good combinations and he hits hard. And he's been able to surprise people because he's a very fast starter, but he's always had trouble with southpaws. I think the majority of his recent losses were to lefties, and he has not beaten very many except for Chiesa, who looked like he was on his way towards winning that fight when it was stopped by cuts. So pretty much southpaws have given Lauzon trouble. And I think it's because he has a really, really rote approach to fighting southpaws. He's like, all right, I'm going to get my foot outside. I'm going to throw the right hand. And he doesn't let his combinations go the same way. And Lauzon's not effective when he's limiting his output. And then Lauzon has always been less effective after the first round. It's why I think both of us picked Diego Sanchez to beat him. Now, Diego Sanchez collected a long overdue knockout loss. But had Sanchez survived that first round, he may still have been able to beat Lauzon, taking him down, stifling him. Lauzon is a first-round winner, sometimes second round. 3 of his 4 third-round finishes came way back in 2005, not against elite competition, except Mike Brown, who was really raw at the time on the ground. And Lauzon has won only 1 decision in his entire career, which is insane for a guy with, 37 fights? He's won a single decision, and it was over a very shop-worn Mac Danzig. Now, that doesn't mean he can't finish Jim Miller, and it doesn't mean he can't take a decision off of Miller, but it does speak to a fundamental flaw in Lauzon's style. Trouble with southpaws, trouble making things happen down the stretch. And Jim Miller is still the better kickboxer, the better wrestler, and at least Lauzon's equal on the ground. So I think it's going to be a closer fight than last time. I think Lauzon's going to have some moments. I'm still going to go with Miller, but it's a shaky pick because, like you said, I can see Miller being more faded than Lauzon. The evidence suggests that he is. I would like to see him kind of come out rejuvenated for this fight, having gotten another good win and put on a good performance. But if his stamina is really as bad as it has looked in some recent fights, if his willingness to pull the trigger, if he's as gun-shy as he has been in recent fights, then Lauzon could overwhelm him and take some early rounds and potentially win a decision on the back of those.
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling. It's weird, too, because they're both 32. They both have been fighting since Lauzon since 2004, Miller since 2005. So there's every reason for them to be and they've both been in a ton of wars. There's every reason for them to both be super shop-worn at this point. It's just that fight Miller had against Diego Sanchez. It's so hard for me to look at that and not just be like, nah, I don't see it. Anybody with something left in the tank is gonna beat you at this point. That it's hard for me not to feel that. And then
cutting out.
These really rinky-dink camps that it's kind of.
What about rinky-dink camps?
They train themselves, basically. They both train out of their own camps.
Yeah.
And it's hard to then look at and be like, you're going to make the right adjustments as you fade for either of these guys. So it's like, well, if Miller's on the slide, then I feel like there's not going to be anything to put the brakes on that.
Miller and Lauzon are both guys who kind of just come into every single fight and do their thing. They're not adjusters. They're not masterful game planners. They don't make huge leaps in technique or skill set. They come in and they are Jim Miller and Joe Lauzon in every fight.
Yeah, and after that Sanchez performance too, I have no faith that Miller has the better gas tank here, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's really the strength of why I'm picking Lauzon here. Because you're right. Southpaw matchup. Lauzon's always terrible against them. But I guess I feel like he did well enough the first time that if Miller's faded, I don't think this is the poison Southpaw matchup of all. This is probably his best Southpaw matchup.
Yeah, if Miller can't let his strikes go, if he's not throwing as many kicks, if he's not shooting the takedowns, if he's not letting his strikes go in the clinch, then he's not Michael Johnson. He's not going to play Matador and let Lauzon run himself out. He's going to still be there to be hit. So
yeah, I'm picking Lauzon. And let's see, the odds on this fight. Lauzon is the favorite, interestingly. Minus 137 to minus 155. Miller, the underdog, plus 138 down to plus 110. That may be worth a bet on Miller just because.
you could maybe give him a small bet if you can get him like north of 130.
Yeah, just because, or let's see, if Miller wins by decision is plus 259. Although, Miller's a pretty good finisher, but Joe Lauzon's tough to finish.
Mm-hmm.
So
plus 138 implies a 42% chance of victory. So if you think this one is 50-50, Miller might be worth a shot.
yeah. Let's see. Then that brings us to the next bout on the main card: Paige VanZant versus Bec Rawlings. And
is this me or is this you?
I think it's you.
You know I love Paige VanZant, Zane.
Yep.
You know she's my favorite person in MMA. Fortunately for Paige, they matched her with like one of the few women I'd really like to see her beat. I don't think Bec Rawlings is a very likable individual, and I don't really enjoy watching her fight because as much as I said this to Pat, I think on Heavy Hands, I think my analogy was some people like fighters who look like they're using a Game Shark, the super athletes, and I like the fighters who win despite holding the controller upside down. I like my crappy athletes who are still like very.
We like the Enrique Barzolas of the world.
Yeah, they're smart and crafty. They have a good skill set, and they know how to overcome their athletic disadvantages. That's not Bec Rawlings. She's not an amazing athlete, and yet she fights like a John Dodson type, like a dynamic fighter who just kind of drifts through the fight. We said this about Garreth McClellan before. In fact, I think I called Garreth McClellan, I think I said he had Bec Rawlings syndrome, because she just attacks anything and everything. If you're in the clinch, she's going to go for some really risky takedown. If you're on the ground, she's going to fight off of her back or jump on a submission that puts her on the bottom. If you're on the feet, she's going to chase after you and throw strikes. She just lets her opponent dictate where the fight goes. And then that can be okay if you've got a solid gas tank, but Bec Rawlings does not. The first decision win of her career was over Seo Hee Ham, which I think most people thought Seo Hee Ham deserved to win. And she only won that one by pinning Ham against the fence and using her size in the third round because Ham is an atom weight. And that's not going to happen with Paige VanZant. Paige VanZant is a very physically imposing fighter. She is athletic both in terms of strength and stamina. She keeps a good pace for a 3 rounds straight, and she's tough as hell, man. That fight with Rose Namajunas, even though it was nowhere near competitive at any point, I think that fight was still somehow more impressive than any of Bec Rawlings' wins, because it showed that Paige VanZant can fight through adversity, can keep coming, doesn't come up with the best ideas, but does keep trying to come up with ways to win the fight, and doesn't look for a way out at any point. You know, like if Paige VanZant had wanted a way out, she had about 3 opportunities before that arm bar at the end. And she didn't. She wanted to keep giving it a shot. So it's got to be Paige VanZant here. She's going to press Rawlings against the fence. She's going to beat her up with elbows and knees. She's going to take her down. She's going to out-grapple her on the ground. Paige VanZant is not Rose Namajunas, but I think I said this when we talked about Kylan Curran recently too. The class difference between her and the rest of the strawweights was shown, I think, in her fight with Felice Herrig. You look at Kylan Curran, and Kylan Curran is very similar to Paige VanZant. She is athletic. She's pretty powerful. She's Paige VanZant without the same level of skill. And while VanZant's skill may not be amazing, VanZant out-grappled Felice Herrig, a very tough veteran, and Kylan Curran was dominated on the floor by the same woman. And Bec Rawlings is not even on Felice Herrig's level as a grappler. She will throw up attacks. She will go for things. She's aggressive, but the technique is there. Things are a little loose, a little sloppy. So Paige VanZant, and I think it'll be a very attritive fight. The question here is whether does she knock Rawlings out? Does she TKO her in round 3, or does she submit her? I'm going to say a submission.
I'm going to say it's going to be a decision. I don't think Paige VanZant has put together quite any of the finishing tools to put most fighters away yet, even if she's beating them up pretty handily.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with most of that. I think Rawlings looked better against Sohee Ham than she has at any point in her career. She looked more patient, more willing to stick to a plan. She's still faded.
Better striking technique for sure.
Yeah, better striking technique. She still got beat up. I just think VanZant's too good of a bully, frankly. Just too good at getting you up against the fence, working you over, mauling you, taking you down, and then working you over on the ground too. And she's powerful and aggressive enough that if she, even if she's not the most technical grappler in the world, she can just bully through a lot of stuff. I mean, that's what she did against Herrig. It was just like, Herrig had her in some bad spots, and VanZant just like ripped herself out and kept on Herrig, and eventually got the better of her as Herrig started to wear down. So I don't think Rawlings is going to win that fight. And yeah, it could be a very close first round, as Rawlings could maybe stay outside and pepper VanZant, whose striking is still wooden and rudimentary.
Yep.
And then as she starts to slow down and get more flat-footed, VanZant could probably catch up with her and start to turn this into a real sort of attritive grappling battle.
Yeah, VanZant, I think, will eventually, if she keeps fighting, and I think she will. She's not Ronda Rousey, because Ronda Rousey wouldn't have taken a loss like that Namajunas one and come back. She still hasn't come back from her own first dominant defeat. VanZant got back in there pretty quickly. Like, she made some money doing Dancing with the Stars, and then I think they offered her a movie role, and she was like, nah, I want to fight. So she has a fighter's will. She wants to go in there, prove herself. She enjoys MMA, but I think she's going to settle into, as she sticks with it, a gatekeeper role. Because at alpha male, fighters don't tend to make vast improvements past a certain point. They don't have a great level of technical instruction there. And Uriah Faber won't have it that way, because anybody who can raise the level of the team is going to take some of the shine away from him. We saw how that worked out with Dwayne Ludwig. Uriah Faber doesn't like that. He likes to be in charge. And so it's a wrestling room environment. People get good because they're training with good people around their same size, but that can only take you so far. AKA has seen the same thing. Like, before the John Jones rematch that didn't happen, Daniel Cormier talked about how this camp was the first time that he and his trainers focused on refining technique. You know what I mean? He was like, that was a revolutionary thing for him. And it's that way at alpha male, except they're not going to have that revolution, because they almost had it with Ludwig and they shunted it. They didn't want it to happen. So basically, VanZant's going to be VanZant for a long time, I think, which makes her a reliable test for fighters coming up. I think she's always going to fall short against the very best in the division, but if you can be overwhelmed, VanZant is going to overwhelm you. So, that, and Beck Rawlings can be overwhelmed.
Top 5 fighter for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. On that note, the odds are in VanZant's favor. She's the favorite -205.
-205.
-205 to -230. Rawlings, the underdog, +196 to +160. So I think that's actually, I think VanZant's kind of worth a bet there, frankly.
Yeah, she may be.
I'd be pretty surprised if Rawlings beat her.
Mm-hmm. VanZant inside the distance is +285. VanZant by decisions +114. You can get underdog odds on her winning by any means, so those both may be worth consideration.
Yeah, maybe just bet on both of those.
Sure.
And then let's see. That brings us to the co-main event, Anthony Pettis versus Charles Oliveira.
Mm-hmm.
Man, what a funky-ass fight.
Mm-hmm.
What a funky-ass fight. Is this you or me?
It's you.
Okay, it's me. I really haven't given this fight a lot of thought, honestly. And now looking at it, it's just kind of like, what the fuck do I really think is going to happen here? Like,
right.
I think Anthony Pettis should beat Charles Oliveira, because Oliveira is still a very wooden striker who really kind of relies on his ability to walk through and eat shots for large stretches of fights.
And that ability is not great, by the way.
No. And Anthony Pettis, for his flaws, you really kind of have to have a consistent grind. Well, I mean, other than Edson Barboza who just kind of upped the game on him.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, it's always been you have to have a consistent grinding wrestling approach to put his back against the cage, to get him off his ability to comfortably strike at range and make him work against the fence for prolonged stretches. And Oliveira, he's been able to do that to guys like Jeremy Stephens a bit, but Jeremy Stephens is also a bit more of a plotter than Anthony Pettis.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys who are really elusive that he would beat. I mean, Frankie Edgar was elusive, and Frankie Edgar also just dialed.
Yeah.
Frankly. So I got to give the edge to Anthony Pettis here. It's just really a test of how does Anthony Pettis look at 145, and how does he respond to losing fights continuously? Like, at some point, that breaks down the massive amounts of confidence that he had in his ability to just be Anthony Pettis and win fights. And so you kind of have to wonder, how is he addressing that? Like, I know he's been moving camps. Is he still at Jackson Wink?
I think he's been doing work with several different teams. I think he did some sessions with Brandon Gibson at Jackson Wink, which would be great. I think he's still at Rufus Sport, though.
Yeah, well, I know he's doing his some course. Well, he even split from Rufus Sport for like his own camp before one of his recent fights. I want to say before the RDA fight, but it might have been before the Alvarez fight. Like, yeah, he was like, I'll still be part of Rufus Sport, but I'll have my own private camp.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the Barboza, or I don't even know if it was after the Alvarez loss, I think, then he was like, oh, I'm moving around and I'm like going to all these different places and traveling. And then I think he's talked about like, I'm going to move to Jackson Wink. And then I never kind of heard anything about that again. Like,
yeah, I'm not sure what is like, I assume Duke Rufus has always been in his corner.
Yeah.
So I assume he's still affiliated. That's where he came up.
Yeah. I don't think he's breaking with that.
Yeah.
That's not to suggest that.
All I know is Brandon Gibson told us a story about how he got to watch Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone spar, and it was the coolest thing, and they both Showtime kicked each other.
Fun.
That's all I know.
But so I wonder where Anthony Pettis' head is at, and I wonder where his training is at.
Yeah.
Because if he's not on point, Charles Oliveira is not a dude you just walk over. Like, Oliveira is a better wrestler than he's given credit for. And is an incredibly crafty grappler, which could play into Pettis' own grappling game. Like, if Pettis is like, fuck yeah, I'll let you go to the ground with me and I'll wrap you up in an arm bar.
That's dangerous, though. Like, Oliveira may be the most dangerous submission artist in the sport. He is very, very tricky from all positions. If you give him any kind of tiny opening in a transition, he is 3 steps ahead of you.
Yeah. So if Pettis his head isn't on straight and he just is like, shit, I'll grapple with Charles Oliveira, why not?
Yeah. That
could get him submitted. Otherwise, but in just the raw game, like what I see, I gotta expect mostly a kickboxing fight, and I gotta expect Anthony Pettis to win that kickboxing fight.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think my secret hope is that learning that he can't just go in and be Anthony Pettis is a good thing for Anthony Pettis.
Yeah.
He didn't learn from it as quickly as like Conor McGregor did from that Diaz fight. McGregor came back and he solved a lot of the problems he had over the course of one admittedly long and very specialized camp. But Anthony Pettis, he had his chances. and still had a lot of the same problems. Now, granted, Eddie Alvarez and Barboza were both different challenges than RDA. He didn't have the opportunity to come in and try to solve the same puzzle that had beaten him immediately after. But a lot of the same problems were there. Like the reason that Barboza beat him was because he pressed the same weaknesses that RDA did in a different kind of fight. The fact that Pettis does not have these little subtle fundamentals, he is kind of a victim of his own talent, because Anthony Pettis, you go back to the very beginning of his MMA career, and he's doing all of this crazy dynamic shit. He's doing spinning kicks and jumping attacks and jumping off the cage and all of this, and that's incredible. But he has finally gotten to a level where the people who can't really strike with him can hang with him. The people who can't wrestle with him are better technical strikers, and the holes start to show. He doesn't have good footwork, for example, a thing that you would expect to be the foundation for any good striker. Anthony Pettis' footwork is all based on his opponent giving him the space. And if his opponent doesn't give him the space or give him the distance that he wants, he doesn't know how to set that distance. And he doesn't know how to pivot away from the fence. Like, I've never seen Anthony Pettis hit a pivot, ever, which is crazy. I have never seen him lift up the heel of his lead foot, turn that foot, and then step off neatly to the side. He's always skipping along the fence, and he just can't get off of that. And Charles Oliveira could press him there. He comes forward. He's aggressive. He likes to just walk right into the clinch and throw knees. And he will be taller than Pettis, even though he is the career featherweight at this point. But to me, the biggest difference in this fight is whether Pettis has made the improvements or not. Toughness, to me, is the big X factor here. Anthony Pettis is extremely tough. There are not many fighters I can imagine taking the beating he took from Rafael dos Anjos and survive for 5 rounds. And there are even fewer I can think of who would take that beating and still be looking for the finish in the 5th round, still be looking to come back and win. Anthony Pettis is mentally and physically very, very tough. And Charles Oliveira is mentally and physically a little lacking in that department. He has, in some fights, kind of seemed to look for a way out. There seemed to be a brief addled decision after Cub Swanson hit him that he was going to be knocked out. I don't know how accurate that is, but it was like Swanson hit him. He was hurt, and he was like, okay, fall down now. You can't go. You can't fight through this. That almost happened again against Nick Lentz. Lentz railed him with a big right hand, and Oliveira turned his back and shelled up against the cage, and he was ready to quit. And he fought through it because Lentz isn't as great a striker as Cub Swanson, nor as powerful. And then against Max Holloway, there was some kind of injury, I guess. They said an esophageal tear, but his post-fight medical screen showed no serious injuries. So, I don't know. I think he felt like he was being hurt and he was being dominated and couldn't come up with a way to stop it from happening. So, I don't want to call a guy a quitter or anything like that, but Anthony Pettis had his orbital.
But you used a lot more words. Like,
I used a lot more words. But here's the thing. Like, he has an injury. He's like, ow, that hurt, and I've been hit to the body, and he basically submits. Anthony Pettis had his orbital exploded in the 1st round by Rafael dos Anjos and fought for 22 more minutes, getting hit in the same spot, and getting hit in the body and getting taken down and brutalized on the ground. Anthony Pettis has that. And Oliveira is easier to hurt too, just physically speaking. Anthony Pettis, very difficult to rock him with a shot. He's got a great chin, and Charles Oliveira doesn't. So I think we will probably have a very competitive fight. It's going to be really exciting and fun. We're going to have some questions answered about whether Pettis can improve, because I don't know that just being at featherweight is going to be that big of a deal for him. I'm more interested in seeing how he develops technically and strategically and mentally as a fighter. But I think at some point, like with Gilbert Melendez, Pettis is going to find some openings that Oliveira can't stop him from finding, because his defense isn't great. And if you don't have great defense, if you're not durable, you need great defense. And Oliveira is neither durable nor defensively savvy. So,
and he's also, Oliveira's, like, for as aggressive as he is and willing to come forward as he is, he's a plodding striker. Like, he is not fleet foot. He's not gonna he's not going to take away space from you quickly or efficiently. he's just going to try to march you down. So Pettis is going to have a lot of opportunities to hit him coming in.
Yeah, it's like if you took away Tony Ferguson's durability and boxing, you would kind of have Charles Oliveira's striking. And that's not really a great place to be. It's exciting, and it can overwhelm some lesser fighters. But Anthony Pettis has, at the very least, shown that he can take a hell of a beating and still look to end the fight. And we know Oliveira can be finished, and often finished and hurt by lesser strikers than Pettis. So I think Pettis is going to find an opening, liver kick, straight right to the face, something at some point, and Oliveira is going to crumple.
Yep. Odds on this fight, Pettis is the favorite, minus 180 to minus 220. Charles Oliveira, plus 186 down to plus 135. I mean, that's Pettis coming off 3 losses, I got to think, is the main driving factor here. Mm-hmm. Because if it's just an on-paper fight, I've got to pick Pettis by a wider margin than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I bet on it or not. Like, I do feel pretty sure that Pettis has the edge here, but again, we don't know where his head's at. At some point, the chin's got to go, so we just don't know. There's too many unpredictable things going on there for me.
And we don't know what this 145 cut's going to look like with him. Like,
I imagine it'll be okay. He's always been a fairly small lightweight, but yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a story. Let me put it this way: there's a story on MMA Mania right now, which, whatever. But it's like, look at how unhealthy and gaunt Anthony Pettis looks in this video, and I gotta admit, in the video, like, he doesn't look great.
Yeah,
like, he looks a bit skeletal.
And I'm always, we've said this many times, but I am always skeptical of late career dropping of weight classes. I don't think it's rarely the solution that fighters want it to be. Like, there's Lorenz Larkin, and it wasn't actually that late career for him. And I can't really think of many others where it was really the saving grace they expected it to be.
It's happened, but it's not worth trying to get into, honestly.
Yeah.
So anyway, on that note, brings us to the main event: Demian Maia versus Carlos Condit. What are your thoughts on this, Connor?
I don't know what Carlos Condit was thinking. And I don't mean that it's an unwinnable fight for him, but this is a guy who was talking about retiring, said he didn't want any fight except for another shot at Robbie Lawler because he felt he won. And he has every right to believe he won. It was a very close fight. He had a lot of success. And I think most people thought he won.
Uh-huh.
But then to turn around like half a year later and say, okay, I'm going to fight Demian Maia is a very risky choice. Like, you're not going to – Maia is a trap fight. Maia is a lot like Jake Shields. He's less hated by fans, but he's not that popular except among really hardcore fans. And he's going to make you look bad if he beats you. He's good and not popular and a spoiler. And so that's the guy who, if you lose to him, it looks like a bad loss. And if you beat him, it doesn't say that much. Not to the casual audience. Now, Maia's on a great winning streak right now. To hardcore fans and maybe to the UFC brass, that means that Condit, who is perennially popular, would get a title shot off of beating Maia. But I just feel like Maia is a trap fight for him because Maia has every opportunity to make Carlos Condit look bad, at least for several rounds. Maia's 38. So, I mean, we all know his strengths. We all know what his skill set looks like. He's 38, and his stamina is not amazing. And I think that is Carlos Condit's biggest avenue to victory here because I don't really have any doubt that Maia is going to take him down and control him in the first round or two of this fight. Now, the question is, can Condit do what Rory McDonald did and make Maia work hard enough that he tires himself out? Because Condit does not have Rory McDonald's takedown defense, and he never has. And his style doesn't lend itself to it because he tends to march forward into these sort of preset combinations and give up his hips, which makes that he's always been open to counters and open to reactive takedowns because he's tall, his feet are out of position, all these things are going wrong. Carlos Condit gets by because he's tough and he's aggressive and he's resourceful. But if Maia can take him down and control him, Condit's got a good guard, but it's not that great. It's not Maia great. You know what I mean? Like we have seen some good grapplers completely outworked by Demian Maia.
Some of the best.
Yeah, some of the very best. He is probably the best pure jiu-jitsu stylist in the sport. We have said this many times on the Vivisections. He is an incredibly underrated wrestler. His chain wrestling is excellent. He is not doesn't have an explosive shot, but once he gets in on you, once he has body contact, he will keep switching up attempts. He will trip you. When you're off balance, he will switch to a double. When that doesn't work, he'll switch to a single and run the pipe. When that doesn't work, he'll take your back and drag you into his back mount. He has a dozen different ways of capitalizing on your reactions to his initial takedowns and so on and so forth.
So before you make your pick, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that Demian Maia will submit Carlos Condit?
No.
Okay, continue.
He may, but I don't think so. I think he's going to have to do a lot of work to keep him down. Or we'll focus mostly because Condit is a pretty good wrestler from the ground. His takedown defense has always been questionable, but he has a good switch. He keeps very active hips, and he attacks with elbows and things from guard. So he's a good wrestler and grappler from the bottom. He's active. So I think Maia, in those situations, more often than not, chooses to neutralize rather than attacking. Man, you know, Maia wrestling. Yeah, Maia wrestling. I think that's what takes his stamina away. When he has to keep fighting for takedowns and fighting to keep you down and take you down over and over, that saps his energy. But when he's on the ground, he can go, man. He didn't tire until the very end of that Ryan LaFleur fight. LaFleur's a better wrestler than Condit. And also that one was scheduled for 3 rounds and was switched to 5 at the last minute. And Maia looked really solid for the 3 rounds he had prepared for. Yeah, I guess I could waffle all day, but I'm going to go with Maia. I think Condit's going to keep coming forward and giving him opportunities for takedowns in a way that Rory McDonald did not. I think he can't fight as consistently from distance. Like, he's going to step in and try to hit Maia, and that's going to give Maia a shot to get in on his hips. And I think on the ground, he's always been a little too willing to play guard and be aggressive from his back, and that's kind of a death sentence against Maia. If Maia tires, Condit is one of the worst guys to have in front of you when you are gasping for breath. But I am going to go with Maia by decision.
Yeah, I will say I want to disagree slightly with one of these, and I think that Maia actually tends to be a better grappler, a better submission grappler when you're struggling to fight him off. When guys are actually working really hard to like stand back up or get their own submission game going or something like that, and not just neutralize him, he's a much better grappler. I mean, that's, he's got submissions over Matt Brown, over Neil Magny, Rick Story, although that's a bit different, but still, like,
Chael Sonnen way back in the day, trying to scramble free from bottom, gave up a triangle.
Yeah. And so a lot of guys who are just like, oh shit, Demian Maia's on me, I'm just going to try and keep myself from getting submitted, they survive. Like,
yeah, that's actually a good point. That's a good point.
And so Carlos Condit is not going to just, oh shit, Demian Maia's on top of me, I need to survive. Like, we know he's going to open himself up. So that might give Maia the opportunity to submit Condit.
Yeah, and that's a gambit. Like, that's the thing that Condit will have to do, because if he's going to get taken down, he has to make Maia work. He can't just let him control him and hope for him to tire out, because it's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
But if he works, then does he give up an arm or give up his neck?
Yeah. The other side, I mean, I am going to pick Carlos Condit here because I just don't think Maia will get that submission. And if he doesn't, I got to think that the last couple of rounds belong to Condit, and I think they're going to belong to him in such a way that the fight, that he wins. Like, I think he's going to knock Maia out.
This could be, if he doesn't knock Maia out, this could be a fight one of the rare fights where both guys get 10-8 rounds. You know what I mean? Like Maia could take Condit down and absolutely ragdoll him on the floor and get a 10-8. And then if Maia gets a little sleepy in rounds 4 and 5, Condit's going to hand him a 10-8 almost for certain. He's going to come after him. If he's really that tired and he can't get him down again, he's going to beat him up.
I should pick Maia by decision. I think is the safest pick here. I think it's the sensible pick. I think Condit gives up so many takedowns that even when Maia is exhausted, Condit may just run in with like a 1-2 punch kick right into a double leg, just kind of combo.
Yep.
And absolutely put himself on the ground and give Maia every excuse to just ride out the fight.
Yep. Condit is one of the oldest of like the Winklejohn stable. He came from another gym, but his style fits very well into what Mike Winklejohn has always done. And I think there is no better example of the limitations of that than Holly Holm's fight with Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah.
Because she kept coming in with these rote combinations, with this idea like, I'm going to throw this. And I think Phil McKenzie said it best. He said that Winklejohn fighters have all of these 50-50 switch-ups, but a lot of them fail because they're switch-ups for which there is a single response that works for both. You know, like that was the problem with Holly Holm. She's like, okay, she countered the left straight right uppercut with the right hook. I'm going to try to feint the left straight, hit her with a jab, and then the left straight. Oh, she hit me with the right hook again. Like she could just keep pivoting away from the left hand and landing that right hook, and it worked over and over and over again because these preset combinations weren't adaptable enough. Carlos Condit is a rote fighter. The good thing for him is that now he's got Brandon Gibson working with him. And we saw like in that Thiago Alves fight, he can be rote, but just change up pieces of his combination and punish you for countering him. And he's going to get hit, but you're going to get hit while you hit him, and he's powerful, and he's a relentless finisher when he has you hurt.
And unlike Holm has like 10 options that she flowcharts to, Condit is like 100. It's just like, here's this constant, okay, I tried that one didn't work. Okay, I'll go to this one, that didn't work. Okay, I'll go to that one didn't work. Okay, I'll go to that one didn't work.
Yeah.
And he'll just do all of them so that like he may go through 5 combinations that don't work. And then he'll throw another, like, it'll just be a different one. Okay, well, the 6th one did work. Great, I'll try the 6th one again. Oh, that didn't work this time. Okay, I'll go through another 5. Yeah. And he'll just, like, it's just ridiculous.
And, of course, his physical advantages, he's a lot more powerful than Holly Holm, as well as being more skilled on the ground, but he's insanely durable.
Yeah.
And he is okay relying on that chin. He probably... I've probably said this about many fighters, but Condit is at least in the discussion for best chin in MMA.
Oh, yeah.
He's insanely hard to finish.
So, because he's so hard to finish, I'm picking him to beat Maia, but I don't think it's a safe pick. I'm making this pick it's like Condit either knocks Maia out or loses. Those are the 2 options.
Yeah.
And he could knock Maia out at any time, or he could just very easily lose a grinding 5-round decision or get subbed because he's working too hard on the ground and gives up a super bad position to Maia.
Yep.
But I'm going to pick Condit by knockout. I think it's a dumb pick, but I'm throwing it out there.
It's just a difficult fight to pick either way. Like I think Maia is the trap fight, and I'm still not at all certain. When you have that kind of innate physical advantage that Condit has, especially when you're against an opponent with a history of gassing out, it is just very difficult to pick for or against you. You know, it's a very difficult fight to call.
Odds on this, Condit is the favorite, -120 to -135. Maia, the underdog, +113 to -110. I like how close the odds are, but I kind of think they should be flipped. I kind of think that Maia deserves to be the favorite here.
Yeah, Condit's always fighting good guys, but he's 2-4 in his last 6 fights.
Yeah, and it's like I say, I think the basics of the style matchup favor Maia.
Yeah.
the basics of Condit, like, because it's not like Condit's any kind of one-punch finisher. Like, it's not like he's just going to land one miracle strike and knock Maia out cold. He might, but that's really unlikely.
Has Maia been knocked out? He was knocked out by Nate Marquardt.
Yeah.
Has anyone else knocked him out?
I don't. Let me see.
He's pretty tough, man. Like, he's pretty durable and surprisingly tricky on the feet too.
That was his. That's the only time he's been knocked out, and that was 2009. That was 7 years ago. Do you realize how long ago that was? That feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
It was 7 damn years ago.
He's tough, man. Like, if it takes Condit 4 rounds to get going, or if it takes Maia, hand in hand, if it takes Maia 4 rounds to become exhausted, Condit could win a 10-8 round or a 10-7 round and still lose the fight.
Yeah.
Tough, man.
I really think that Maia is the smart, safe pick here. And I think that he should be the favorite. So I think that there's a bet to be made there against Carlos Condit. Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, Maia at plus 113 odds. It's not great. It's not like, oh, well, you know, put the kids through college kind of bet. But it's, I think he deserves to be on the minus 127 side.
What's Maia by submission?
Maia by submission is oh yeah, there we go. Maia wins by submission plus 485. So maybe.
Yeah. Has Condit ever been submitted?
Yes. Condit has been submitted a couple of times. Once, I think, by like Ryan Healy.
Okay, that sounds right. Probably a while ago, right?
Yeah, he's submitted once by Pat Healy in 2006.
And then Carlo Prater in 2004.
Yep, and Satoru Kitaoka in 2005. 3 early submissions, never since.
Yeah, not in some time.
But then again, I mean, he also hasn't faced a grappler like Demian Maia.
Demian Maia is the only guy I can think of who fights really good grapplers and makes them look really mediocre. Like, Jacare Souza doesn't even have that level. When Jacare Souza really dominates someone in the grappling, it's usually someone that we expect him to dominate. I picked Demian Maia over Gunnar Nelson, but I didn't expect him to make him look that terrible.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't expect him to make Neil Magny look as terrible as it did, especially considering how good Neil Magny looked grappling in his next several fights. So
yep,
he's a scary dude to tangle with on the floor, man.
Yeah, I honestly think Maia should be the favorite here. I'm not like I say, it's not the kind of big thing. I just think that we've seen so much of Maia being excellent at wrestling and excellent at control grappling for round after round that I'm picking Condit off a chance, but it's not like I think that the safe bet is with Maia and that wrestling and grappling because we've seen Condit get put on his back so much. On that note, I think that covers us. Any other bets? Well, most of this card's just not very bettable at all, frankly. Condit maybe, or Maia maybe. Pettis might be a bigger favorite than he's marked at against Charles Oliveira, maybe. Paige VanZant should maybe be a bigger favorite over Beck Rawlings, maybe. Other than that,
yeah, it's the odds feel accurate, and that means hard to bet.
Yep. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at Bloody Elbow. Give this video a like. That's a thumbs up on YouTube down there. Subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM. And stay tuned. I'm going to have another Vivisection right now. I got to set it up for Bellator. And we'll be coming at you with the 6th round. And then we'll have be getting ready for the next set of shows. You got Knuckle Up and Vivisection and Heavy Hands and If I Did It and Care Don't Care for Fight Night Hamburg with Arlovsky and Barnett next week. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.